Night was falling over the kingdom of Hanul, painting the rooftops of Changhua Palace in shades of gold and red. The wind carried the scent of burning incense from the temples, and the soft echo of bells drifted across the walls. It looked like a scene from a legend, but in the heart of one young woman, there was only pain. Han Eun-ji, daughter of a simple craftsman from the village of Seongmin, never imagined her fate would lead her into the royal halls. All she had known was the sound of her mother's needle stitching clothes for nobles and the heat of her father's forge, shaping swords she would never wield. Her humble life gave her grace, but also left her scarred by the shadow of inequality. In the center of the capital, the great Gwanghan Square buzzed with whispers. Everyone spoke of only one thing, the Grand Lotus Flower Festival, where the heiress of the most powerful family, Seo Min-kyung, would display her beauty and wealth before the royal court. Min-kyung, famous for her arrogance, was the favorite to become the future princess consort. Proud, beautiful, and cruel, she looked down on everyone, especially those who dared to cross her path. But that night, something unexpected was about to happen. The crowd gathered under floating lanterns that lit up the sky and reflected on the palace lake. Eun-ji, driven by curiosity and the desire to see a world that had always been forbidden to her, stepped into the square. She wore only a simple dress, sewn by her own hands. No jewels, no status, yet her eyes shone brighter than any diamond. In the middle of the celebration, as everyone bowed to Min-kyung, the first shock came. The heiress, dressed in golden silk brought from distant lands, noticed Eun-ji among the crowd. Her eyes, sharp as blades, locked on her with contempt. A heavy silence filled the air when, with a mocking gesture, Min-kyung called her a village intruder. The cruel laughter echoed through the stone corridors, joined by the chuckles of the nobles. Eun-ji felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. But before the tears could come, a voice rose above the crowd. Firm, powerful, yet strangely gentle, who are you to decide who belongs here? The silence turned into shock. The crowd parted, revealing the owner of the voice. On a white horse, with a royal blue cape flowing in the wind, stood Prince Lee Ji-hoon. His eyes were not on Min-kyung, but on Eun-ji. In that instant, under the lantern-filled sky, destiny began to move. And so, the young woman who had been humiliated before the entire kingdom would, without knowing it, become the prince's chosen one. While the nobles of the kingdom of Hanul paraded in imported silks and golden carriages, Han Eun-ji walked barefoot on the uneven stone streets of the village of Seongmin. Her steps were humble, yet carried a quiet strength, the same strength that had supported her family ever since her father fell ill and could no longer work at the forge with the same vigor. Eun-ji was known among the villagers as the girl with hopeful eyes. Not for wealth, not for titles, but because, even in hardship, she always had a smile to offer. She cared for her mother, sewing clothes for local merchants, and for her father, helping him polish weapons that would never be hers. Her life was made of small, daily sacrifices, invisible to the royal court, but immense for those struggling to survive. The small room she shared with her mother was cramped, lit only by an oil lamp she lit each night. While she sewed until her fingers bled, she dreamed. She dreamed of gardens she had never walked through, of music she had never heard, of a life where she didn't have to bow before eyes full of contempt. But above all, she dreamed of freedom. And yet, Eun-ji's fate always seemed marked by the shadow of inequality. In the capital, her family was seen as useful, but disposable. The iron her father shaped and the embroidery her mother stitched were desired by the nobility, but none of them ever received thanks. They were invisible hands serving a kingdom that only celebrated the powerful. Even so, Eun-ji had something no jewel of the court could ever buy, a strong heart and a bold mind. From a young age, she learned to observe. She watched the wealthy clients who came to her door, the royal guards who marched through the village, the workings of the kingdom itself, as if searching to understand where, among so much false glitter, her truth could fit. Her only refuge lay beyond the village walls, in the ancient Nokdu forest. There, among the sound of streams and the whispers of trees, Eun-ji found peace. She often spent hours hidden among the leaves, writing on scraps of parchment discarded by merchants. On those pages, she drew a life she might never live, but one that kept her soul alive. She carried a unique beauty, not the kind shown in jewels or silk gowns, but one born from honesty and strength. Her black hair, usually tied simply, fell over her face when she sewed. Her hands, marked with calluses, were still delicate in the way they cared for those she loved. And her eyes. Eunji's eyes were different. They did not accept the destiny imposed on her. They saw beyond the walls that divided rich and poor. Eunji never believed she could be part of the great stories told in Gwanghan Square, tales of princesses chosen by the heavens and marriages sealed by prophecy. To her, those were only stories to entertain the powerful. What she didn't know was that soon, her own life would become the greatest of those tales. What made her special wasn't just her kindness, but the silent flame of rebellion burning in her chest. The same flame that pushed her, on that fateful night, to cross the gates of the capital and blend into the crowd at the royal ceremony. A simple, yet daring act. A step that would change everything. She didn't know it yet, but the gods of Hanul had already written her name beside someone no one would ever expect, the crown prince. Eunji, the humble daughter of Seongmin, was about to become the center of the greatest struggle the kingdom of Hanul had ever witnessed. If there was anyone in the kingdom of Hanul who could walk as if the world belonged to her, it was Seo Min-kyung. Born into the wealthiest and most powerful family of the court, the Seos, she had been raised since birth to believe her word was law, her smile worth more than the blood of the people, and her beauty a sharp weapon. Min-kyung was not just the daughter of any count. Her father, Lord Seo Dae-hyun, was the king's direct advisor and owner of the richest farmlands in the realm. Her mother, Lady Warren, was famous for hosting lavish banquets at Gyeonghwa Hall, where even the most powerful nobles bowed. From early on, Min-kyung learned that wealth was not just privilege, it was an invisible crown that set her apart from everyone else. To the people's eyes, she was dazzling. Her black hair was treated with rare oils brought from the islands of Gyeongdo, and her dresses were embroidered with golden threads from southern caravans. Her skin seemed untouched by the sun, and her posture, always flawless, gave the impression that she didn't even breathe the same air as the others. But behind that perfection was a heart hardened by arrogance. Min-kyung saw everyone beneath her as disposable pieces on a board where only she deserved to shine. It was common for her, when crossing Gwanghan Square, to demand that the people kneel, just to prove her power reached beyond the palace walls. The court whispered that Min-kyung already saw herself as the future crown princess. Her dream was to unite her family with royalty by marrying Prince Lee Ji-hoon, heir to the throne. To her, that was not a wish, it was destiny. After all, who would dare refuse the hand of the most powerful heiress in the kingdom? Her manners were refined only when it suited her. Before the king and queen, she was sweet, delicate, almost angelic. But away from royal eyes, her poison revealed itself. Servants trembled at her voice. Village girls summoned to serve at her banquets were humiliated for the smallest mistake. Min-kyung could not bear the idea of being outshined, not even by a shadow. That's why, on the night of the Lotus Flower Festival, when her gaze fell on Han Eunji, a deep discomfort flared in her chest. The village girl wore no jewels. Held no titles, yet she carried something Min-kyung could never accept, a natural glow that could not be bought. Anger burned in her eyes like embers. To Min-kyung, Eunji's mere presence was an insult. How dared a peasant stand near the nobility? How dared she raise her head in the same space where Seo Min-kyung paraded like an uncrowned queen? In that instant, she decided to humiliate Eunji in front of everyone. Her laugh echoed through the stone corridors, cold as steel. Look at that. Seongmin village sent one of its little seamstresses to play princess. The words cut through Eunji's heart like blades. The crowd laughed, because laughing with Min-kyung was the only way to survive. But inside, many whispered, she went too far. Min-kyung didn't notice, or perhaps didn't care, that the prince had been watching everything from afar. To her, Ji-hoon was nothing more than another prize, another symbol of power to decorate her life of luxury. It wasn't love, it was possession. And deep inside, she was convinced no peasant girl could ever threaten her destiny. But Min-kyung underestimated something she had never learned to face, the strength of someone who has nothing left to lose. Her scorn for Eunji would be the first domino to fall, starting a battle that would not end with torn dresses or sharp words, but with broken hearts and fates irreversibly sealed. The Festival of Lotus Flowers was the most awaited event of the year in the Kingdom of Hanul. Held in the gardens of Chonghua Palace, it gathered nobles and common people for a night of music, dance, and offerings to the gods who, according to tradition, blessed the land with prosperity. Lanterns floated into the sky like stars born from human hands, their reflections glowing on the royal lake, turning the night into a spectacle of light. It was in this setting that Han Eunji's fate would change forever. Almost without thinking, she had decided to cross the capital gates to see the festival. She had no invitation, no fancy clothes, only a simple bluish-gray dress she had sewn with her own tired fingers. Her heart pounded, torn between fear of being discovered and the hope of witnessing, just once in her life, the beauty she had only heard of in stories. But her presence did not go unnoticed. In the center of the great hall, under the golden glow of chandeliers, stood Seo Min-kyung, radiant in a red silk gown embroidered with gold threads. She seemed to shine brighter than all the lanterns together, and she knew it. Surrounded by flattering nobles, she walked with pride. When her eyes fell on Eunji, the contempt was instant. The heiress moved toward her, dragging with her the silence of the crowd, as if everyone waited for the blow to come. "What do I see here?" Min-kyung said, her voice dripping with irony. "A peasant daring to mix with nobles? Tell me, did your rags come with your insolence?" Laughter echoed. Eunji felt her face burn. She tried to stay strong, but each word was a blade cutting her dignity. Min-kyung did not stop. Like a predator playing with its prey, she stepped closer, grabbed Eunji's arm, and lifted the sleeve of her handmade dress. "Look, everyone," she shouted. "This poor thing wears crooked stitches and dares stand in the presence of the court. Did she come to beg for scraps, disguised as a guest?" The nobles' laughter filled the gardens. Some looked away, ashamed, but no one dared intervene. For the wealthy, laughing was the safest way to survive Min-kyung's poison. Eunji felt her eyes sting with tears, but did not let them fall. She took a deep breath. The urge to run was strong, but her dignity would not allow her to bow. "I did not come to beg," she answered, her voice trembling yet firm. "I only came to see the beauty of the festival, which I thought belonged to all the people of Hanul." Her words, simple and honest, cut through the silence. For a brief moment, the laughter stopped. But Min-kyung could not stand being challenged, even by a commoner. Her face hardened. With a sharp gesture, she knocked from Eunji's hands the small lantern she carried, ready to release into the sky like the others. It rolled and fell into the lake, its flame dying instantly. "Now you remember your place," Min-kyung said coldly. The crowd held its breath. Some whispered that the heiress had gone too far, but no one dared speak out. Eunji stood still, feeling the weight of the world press on her shoulders. Her extinguished lantern seemed to symbolize the fate Min-kyung wished for her, invisible, without the right to dream. But destiny sometimes finds ways to resist. Suddenly, a firm voice broke the silence. "Enough." Every gaze turned. From the top of the staircase leading to the royal hall, Prince Lee Ji-hoon descended, wearing a deep blue cloak with the crest of Hanul embroidered on his chest. His expression was serious, almost stormy. The guards cleared the way as Ji-hoon approached the two young women. His dark, piercing eyes were not on Min-kyung but on Eunji. "Who gave you the right to decide who is worthy of this festival, Min-kyung?" The shock was overwhelming. No one had ever dared rebuke the heiress in public, let alone the prince himself. Min-kyung swallowed hard, trying to regain her composure, though fury burned inside her. Eunji, on the other hand, could hardly breathe. The prince had not only defended her before everyone but had chosen to look at her, as if she were the only one there. In that moment, beneath the moon and the lanterns rising into the night, the destinies of 3 lives became entangled: Min-kyung's arrogance, Eunji's wounded dignity, and Ji-hoon's decisive gaze. The humiliation suffered that night would not be forgotten. Instead, it would be the seed of a silent war, one where love and power would clash with devastating force. The prince's command cut through the laughter like a blade. The music in Jianghua Hall faltered, the drums stopped for a moment, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Lee Ji-hoon stepped down the stairs with steady steps, and the guards, led by Captain Choi Jin-woo, pushed the crowd back until only 3 figures remained in the center of the world: the prince, Seo Min-kyung, and Han Eun-ji. The beauty of this festival is not the heritage of one family, Ji-hoon said, looking at the lanterns on Lake Yanawa. It's a promise made to the people of Hanul. Min-kyung swallowed her anger like poison. She bowed just enough not to challenge the crown, threw a sharp look at Eun-ji, and walked away with her entourage, the tail of her silk dress whipping the stone floor. The whispers returned, but now they were different, full of shock and curiosity. Ji-hoon leaned toward Eun-ji, his voice low, meant only for her. Your name? Han Eun-ji, Your Highness, she answered, holding his gaze even as her voice trembled. From the village of Seongmin. Han Eun-ji of Seongmin, he repeated, as if stamping it in his memory. Walk with me. He led her through the lantern-lined path to Wolgwang Pavilion, a wooden terrace above the lake, where the reflections of lights looked like an upside-down sky. The Jadium garden filled the air with the scent of night flowers, and far away, the music started again, softer, like it was afraid to break something sacred. At the pavilion, a palace maid, Yoon Seol, brought 2 unlit lanterns and wish papers. Ji-hoon thanked her with a simple nod and placed them in front of Eun-ji. Yours was extinguished, he said. I want us to light another. Not for me. For you. Eun-ji touched the paper with her fingertips, still feeling the sting of humiliation. The silence wasn't empty, it was shelter. She looked at Ji-hoon with raw honesty. Your Highness, I am nobody in this court. Tomorrow, they will still point at me in Gwanghan Square as the intruder from Seongmin. What difference does a new lantern make? He placed his hand on the pavilion's railing, staring at the lake's surface. It doesn't fix everything. But it starts something. I also learned early that some shadows don't disappear with one candle. He turned to her. I grew up behind walls tall enough to hide the horizon. Sometimes, I leave in disguise to see how the kingdom really breathes. I've seen you before. Eun-ji froze. Where? At Dechen Market. You helped an old merchant hold up the boards of his stall so they wouldn't fall on a child. Nobody noticed. I did. Her cheeks warmed, surprised that such a small gesture had reached the palace. She tried to cover her discomfort with light irony. So the prince wanders around collecting moments from common people? I collect truths, he answered, serious. And tonight, you were one of them. Seol. Lit a small oil fire, its glow wrapping the pavilion in warmth. Ji-hoon handed Eun-ji the calligraphy brush. Write your wish. Not a request to be allowed to exist. A statement. Eun-ji dipped the brush, hesitated for a second, then wrote, May dignity not need an invitation. The letters, firm despite her shaking hand, dried like a vow. Ji-hoon watched, his dark eyes reflecting the flame. May I, he asked, and when she nodded, he wrote beneath her words, May Hanul recognize it. Eun-ji gasped, caught between fear and awe. To write the kingdom's name, it's dangerous. More dangerous is pretending nothing happened, he replied, tying the paper to the lantern frame with a red protection string. When people believe humiliation is normal, the kingdom rots in silence. He lifted the lantern, and together they brought it to the fire. The paper swelled, the hot air pulled it skyward. For a moment it wavered, and Eun-ji instinctively steadied the base. Her fingers brushed Ji-hoon's, a second, but enough to spark something else. The lantern rose, climbing past the reflections until it was another star in the sky. Thank you, Your Highness, Eun-ji whispered, her voice carrying everything, gratitude, exhaustion, wonder, and a new courage. Not here. Not Your Highness, he said softly. Ji-hoon. The bare name hung between them, intimate as a shared secret. Across the lake, in the shadows of Hyungrim Terrace, Seo Min-kyung watched, her fists tight inside her silk sleeves. No music could hide the sound of her wounded pride. Tomorrow, they will come for you, Eun-ji warned, glancing at the shadows. They'll say you defended me to shame the Seo family. And they'll say you came close to me to use my name, Ji-hoon added calmly. Words are easy weapons. I prefer actions. He pulled a narrow blue thread from his ceremonial sleeve, cloth woven in Bioqua atelier, worn only by guards during festivals, and tied it around Eunji's wrist, plain and simple. This is not a gift. It's a sign. If someone treats you cruelly inside the capital, show it. Captain Choi will order the guards to recognize it. This could make things worse, she whispered. Or show the kingdom that someone is finally watching, he said firmly. For a moment, neither spoke. The lake breathed. Lanterns drifted, and Chonghua Palace felt less like stone and more like a sleeping beast, aware of every step. Jihoon finally broke the silence with a question that sounded like a promise. Will you return to Nocto Forest? Eunji's eyes widened. How do you? Truths, remember? A faint smile touched his lips. If you need a place away from judging eyes, go to Bake Seal Bridge at dawn. Follow the pale stones. No one bothers those who walk too early to be seen. She nodded, surprised by the offer of refuge, not an improper invitation, but a map to breathe. In the distance, bells marked the festival's end. The last lanterns rose all at once. As if the sky was swallowing them in a sigh. I must go, Eunji said, remembering she was still a commoner, still Seongmin's daughter, still had a house with a lamplight and a mother with calloused fingers waiting. So must I, Jihoon answered, stepping back to return the distance titles demanded. But what began here does not end with the music. Eunji gave a small bow, enough to honor the crown. Without surrendering what had just been born inside her. As she turned, she caught a glimpse of Seo Minkyung on the terrace edge. No words, no confrontation, only the silent knowledge that from this night on, nothing would be simple. She walked through the lantern path to the east gate. Passing under Hanyeonnim Gate, she touched the blue thread on her wrist, not as armor, but as a reminder. May dignity not need an invitation. The wish written on the lantern now burned in her chest. At Wolgwang Pavilion, Jihoon stayed alone a while, watching where their lantern disappeared. He closed his eyes, sealing a silent vow. Behind him, Captain Choi waited. From today, any abuse in Gwanghan Square will be punished in the crown's name, Jihoon said without turning. And spread quietly that palace festivals belong to the people. Let's see who dares laugh at the sky. As you command, Highness, Choi replied, hiding his surprise. The night ended. The festival, like every other, would be remembered for lights, music, and promises. But for 3 people, it meant something more, a blue thread on a humble wrist, a lantern that refused to die. And a look that chose in the middle of everyone. And in the shadows of Hyungrim Terrace, Seo Minkyung's wounded pride found a new name, vengeance. The morning after the festival, Hanul woke up different. The wind sweeping across the roofs of Chonghua Palace seemed to carry messages, and every hallway had an ear. The prince's gesture at Wolgwang Pavilion had turned into whispers at Gwanghan Square, exaggerations in Jianghua Hall, and open insult at the private dinners in the Seo Mansion. And where there are whispers, there is poison. Seo Minkyung did not cry. Steel does not get wet. She withdrew to Hyungrim Terrace with Lady Warren and Lord Seo Daehyun, planning her counterattack as if arranging a banquet, cold dishes, served slowly. First, the rumors, spread by ladies-in-waiting and scribes, the peasant girl from Seongmin seduced the prince, Amori Amomeu, she was given symbols of the royal guard. She plans to climb the throne steps through scandal. Then came the institutional strike, Minister of Protocol Park Do-gun, loyal to the Seo family, drafted an addendum to the Royal Decorum Edict. Participation in palace festivities requires the sponsorship of a noble house. Old paper, new ink, clear target. In Seongmin village, Han Eunji's life began to shrink. Her father, Han Byung-ho, lost blade polishing contracts, merchants were advised to find other blacksmiths. Her mother, Han Mi-sun, saw clients return orders, regretting the embroidery. At night, someone marked the family's door with charcoal, a peony, the Seo family's symbol of pride, and the word intruder. Amomeu, these weren't just threats. They were boundaries. In the capital, the district guard, led by Sergeant Im Tae-soo, stopped Eunji at Hanyeonnim Gate. Where did you get that blue thread? Illegal use of a royal insignia is a crime. Eunji calmly raised her wrist. It is a safe conduct given by the ceremonial guard. Captain Choi Jin-woo instructed me to show it in case of harassment. The sergeant hesitated, fear and ambition mixed in his eyes. Before his hand reached for Eunji's wrist, the echo of boots cut through the street. Choi Jin-woo appeared with 2 guards from Byokwha Atelier. Strange, Sergeant Im, said Choi, his voice low but sharp, to see someone harassing a citizen under official protection. Who do you serve today? Im Tae-soo bowed, sweating in shame. The crowd breathed again. Eunji only thanked with a nod. Gestures, she remembered Ji-hoon's words. But Min Kyung didn't stop. She invited half the court to the Thai Feast of 100 Lanterns, at Jayanghwa Hall, a parade of silk and arrogance. She ordered a jade brooch from her collection to be discreetly slipped into the cloak of a noble lady, who then lost it near the service wing. When Yoon Seol, a palace maid, found it near the cooking pots. Eyes immediately turned to the village girls called to help. Thief, someone whispered. From Seongmin, another added. The shadow Min Kyung wanted was already cast. The next day, the court council gathered. Under the ceiling painted with cranes in Seonjeong Hall, Lord Seo Daehyun spoke with a voice that filled the room. Your Majesty King Seon-won, the kingdom is unsettled. Allowing a lowborn to mix with royal duties violates all decorum. The prince has been careless. Queen Jo-yeon kept her face of stone, but Ji-hoon did not wait for her signal. Decorum is not a license to humiliate the people. The crown exists for all subjects, not just the wealthy. Daehyun smiled like one savoring bitter tea. The crown exists to last, Your Highness. And to last, it requires order. The king closed the council without decree, aware that the balance was a single thread. Politics in Hanul that day became a tide war, retreat in the hall, advance in the corridors. At dawn, on Baekseal Bridge, the mist still clung to the stones. Eunji arrived with her heart full of questions and the blue thread still tied to her wrist. My father lost his work, Ji-hoon. My mother is shunned. And now they say that I and the girls from the village stole jade from the palace. He took a deep breath. The brooch was planted. Seol told me what she saw and what she could not say. He pulled out a parchment sealed by the guard command. This is a hangman, a safe conduct extended to your family. It won't stop malice, but it demands a response. They will say it's privilege. Let them. We will answer with law. I am opening dawn hearings at Hanun Terrace, public meetings, weekly, so merchants, artisans, and villagers can speak directly to the crown. If Minister Park has paper, I have the square. Eunji wanted to smile, but the weight was heavy. Protect my parents before protecting the square. I've already sent Choi Jin-woo to place 2 trusted men in Seongmin. Quietly. He searched her eyes. And don't walk alone after the evening bell. On the other side of the city, Seo Min-kyung gripped the railing at Hyungrim Terrace. He's going to use the people against us, said Lady Warren. Not the people, Min-kyung corrected. Stories. And stories can be shaped. That afternoon, the etiquette lessons in Yolam Court introduced a new chapter, the 4 distances, measured steps separating nobles and commoners during ceremonies. An invention by Park Do-gun, made to sound ancient so it would pass as law. Guards began measuring guests' positions with wooden rods. Wrong step, fine. Persistence, expulsion. Humiliation had been formalized. Returning to the capital to deliver embroidery at Deechan Market, Eunji felt the walls closing in. Ladies whispered, "Witch of the lake," boys mocked with fake bows, merchants avoided her eyes. When a stone rolled near her feet, she didn't look back. She walked on. At Guxian Alley, 2 men in fine coats blocked her path. Hands too clean for thugs, perfume too rich for cart drivers, Seo's men. That thread on your wrist gives you courage, one said, falsely kind. What if we cut it? Eunji replied with what she had, firmness. If you touch me, the whole street will see whose hand commands you. Tension broke when Choi Jin-woo and his men appeared as if from the walls themselves. The 2 vanished, leaving only expensive perfume behind. The captain walked beside Eunji to Hanyeonam Gate. My lady, he said with rare respect, in long wars, courage is a kind of savings, spend it slowly. That night, the Feast of 100 Lanterns. Jiangwa Hall sparkled like a trap. Seo Minkyung crossed the hall like a sentence, dark blue silk dress, silver peonies embroidered. At one point, she raised her cup, to the traditions that keep us standing. Lee Ji-hoon raised his. To the people that keep us standing. Half the hall toasted with Minkyung. The other half, with the prince. The crystal clinked, divided. The king understood. The court understood. And the city woke up with another divide, invitation versus conviction. At week's end, posters were nailed at Gwanghan Square, dawn hearings, Hanun Terrace, at the first bell. Below, the seal of the air. At sunrise, lines formed, artisans, washerwomen, tea sellers, fishermen from Lake Yanawa. Ji-hoon listened to complaints, took notes, punished visible abuses. The names Im Tae-soo and Park Do-gun came up more than once. Stories were finding an owner. And it is when stories find an owner that power trembles. Seo Minkyung gathered allies in the Seo mansion. If he insists on playing judge in the square, we'll force him to a bigger stage. At the harvest celebration, before the entire kingdom, the prince will have to choose, the tradition that sustains us, or the peasant girl who bewitched him. AMOMU that night, Hanul's lanterns flickered. Not from wind, but from omen. The conflict had left the halls, and now ruled the streets, the markets, the tables. Between the peony drawn in charcoal and the blue thread on her wrist, the kingdom learned that neutrality is also a choice. And some choices, when they come, don't ask for permission, they ask for courage. The kingdom of Hanul awaited the harvest celebration as if awaiting a judgment. The hills around Chonghua Palace were covered in golden grain, a symbol of abundance. Caravans from distant villages passed through the Hanyunim Gate carrying baskets of rice, flowers, and offerings. But behind the festival, the whispers in the streets were not blessings, but speculations. Will the prince choose heiress Seo Minkyung, or will he dare to stand with the peasant from Seongmin? In the heart of the capital, Gwanghan Square had been turned into a stage. Banners of the royal family's crest waved beside the peony flowers. Symbol of the Seo clan, as if destiny itself would be decided there. At the center rose the platform of abundance, where the prince would give his speech of gratitude to the people. But everyone knew this was not just about harvest, it was about alliances, blood, and the future. Seo Minkyung, dressed in a white and gold hanbok, prepared herself like a queen already crowned. Her mother, Lady Warren, whispered instructions. When the prince announces the harvest, you will extend your hand. It is the expected gesture, the gesture that seals destiny. And if he hesitates? Minkyung asked, venom hidden in her eyes. Then we will make sure it is not hesitation, but an insult, Lady Warren replied. On the other side, among the gathered crowd, Hanun-ji kept her eyes lowered, her wrist still marked by the blue thread Ji-hoon had given her at the festival. She wore no silk, no jewels, only a simple blue-gray hanbok, the same shade as the night her dignity was wounded. Her presence was already a risk, but after so much humiliation, Eun-ji no longer ran. She was there to see if the prince was only a momentary protector, or something more. The bells rang. Prince Lee Ji-hoon appeared from Chonghua Palace, accompanied by the king and queen. His deep blue robe bore the crest of the celestial dragon, symbol of the air. The crowd bowed in unison. But Ji-hoon raised his hand, asking everyone to stand. Today, we are not here for one to bow to another, his voice rang, firm and clear. We are here to give thanks together for what the earth has given us. The people murmured, surprised by his inclusive tone. The nobles frowned. And then, the moment came. Minkyung stepped forward, her gaze locked on Ji-hoon. She extended her delicate hand, a gesture trained and repeated in polished mirrors since childhood. The entire court held its breath, waiting for the prince to seal what would be seen as a promise of engagement. But Ji-hoon did not move. Instead of taking the heiress's hand, his eyes searched the crowd. And stopped where no one expected, on Eun-ji. The silence became heavy. Some whispered in shock, others gasped as if witnessing a sacrilege. Ji-hoon stepped down from the platform and walked toward the people. The guards hesitated but did not dare stop him. Standing before Eunji, he extended his hand, not to Min Kyung, not to the court, but to the daughter of Seongmin. Han Eunji, he said, his voice carrying across the square, you were not chosen by birth, but by character. Not by wealth, but by courage. Today, before the entire kingdom, I declare, if I must walk beside someone, let it be beside the one who honors the dignity of Hanul. The shock was absolute. Min Kyung's hand hung in the air, her face frozen like cracked stone. Her lips trembled, and her eyes filled not with pain, but with fury. This is an insult, she shouted, breaking her composure. A peasant cannot stand equal to royalty. She is nothing but an intruder who shames this kingdom. But the people reacted. A simple man from the market, Nam Kyung-ho, raised his voice, an intruder? She was the one who endured humiliation. She was the one the prince defended when no one else dared. Soon, other voices joined, rising like an unexpected chorus, Eunji. Eunji. The king and queen exchanged grave looks. The sovereign knew a prince could oppose nobles, but never the heart of the people. By taking Eunji's hand, Jihoon was not only defying the Seo family, he was rewriting the invisible line that separated nobles from commoners. Min Kyung stepped back, her eyes full of hatred. The public defeat was a wound deeper than any weapon could cause. Meanwhile, Eunji, with tears in her eyes, held Jihoon's hand. No words were needed, the gesture spoke for itself. And so, under the golden sun of the harvest, before the entire kingdom, the prince made his choice, not for tradition, but for love. Seo Min Kyung's hand stayed suspended for what felt like forever above the platform of abundance. She realized it wasn't air that was missing, but her world collapsing. With the grace of someone sheathing a blade, she lowered her fingers. She walked down the steps without stumbling, but the shine of her white gold hanbok broke in her eyes. As she passed through Gwanghwan Square, she heard a chorus that should never exist, Eunji. Eunji. She didn't walk faster. Queens don't run. Queens bleed in silence. At the Seo Manor, she locked herself inside Waryong Pavilion. She ripped the jade hairpin from her hair, stabbed it into the table, and let her breath turn into sound. Lady Warren entered without asking. Like she always had since Min Kyung was a child who refused to fail. Control your face, her mother said, no hug, no kiss. The walls have eyes. He humiliated me, Min Kyung answered, low and sharp. In front of the people. In front of the king. Lord Seo Dae-hyun came last. He didn't speak of pity, but of cost. Public losses demand private gains. Today we lost applause. Tomorrow we'll gain a decree. They sat like generals. Minister Park Do-gun was called. He brought scrolls and the old weapon of cowards, tradition. I'll propose the restoration of the trial of the four halls, he announced, unrolling the scroll. A test for any woman presented as consort, Yolam Hall, etiquette and manners, Sejin Hall, letters and history. Jainghwa Hall, music and arts, and Hyopjin Hall, ceremony. Old, forgotten, convenient. And who judges? Asked Lady Warren. My men, Park smiled shortly. And your allies. Min Kyung listened, but she wanted more than papers. She wanted invisible wounds. And the maid near the prince. Yoon Seol. Remove her. Park weighed his words, better to bend than to break. A sick brother, an old debt, there's always a string. By sunset, messengers left. One to Seonjeong Hall, where the king heard ministers, one to the district guard, where Sergeant Im Tae-soo longed for relevance, and one to the palace kitchens without a seal, rumors feed better than feasts. The commoner from Seongmin bewitched the prince. The maid stole jade. The dawn hearings are a cover for rebellion. Words don't need truth. They only need to arrive first. At dawn, alone at Hyungrim Terrace, Min Kyung looked at Yanoa Lake as if reading an oracle. She remembered being a child, running through gardens, her mother correcting each bough, her father saying love is a luxury, power is food. Rage was an old fire. But beneath it was a thin thread of fear. If she wasn't chosen, who would be? She clenched the jade pin in her palm until pain gave her silence. The next day, the court woke to the royal seal edict restoring the consort trial. Ink barely dry, lists already hung in Yolam courtyard, dates, rules, judges. And a threat written in perfect calligraphy: fail 2 halls in a row and you cannot be presented again. Amor Emu. No one said Han Eunji's name. No one needed to. In the capital, Eunji felt the ground shift. At Dechen Market, merchants greeted her with too much care, respect sharpened by fear. At night, back in Seongman, her mother's eyes kept watch and her father's silence was too heavy to be peace. On the table, an envelope shrank the room: old debt, new interest. Someone dug up the past to create urgency. Not the merchant. Someone whispering in his ear, said Lee Ji-hoon at dawn, by Baekseal Bridge. He carried a hidden scroll in his coat. Extended decree, it covers your home, your parents. And Yoon Seol. Seol. Eunji raised her head. They offered help for her brother, in exchange for silence and good memory. Ji-hoon closed his hand. The kingdom's memory will hear another story. That morning, the dawn hearings at Hanun Terrace were more crowded than ever. Nam Kyung-ho told of inspectors measuring laundresses' steps in Yolam courtyard, fishermen spoke of new invented taxes, artisans of clients paying just to humiliate them. The prince wrote names, crossed data, gave orders. Captain Choi Jin-woo arrested 2 men posing as etiquette inspectors, both tied to Park Do-gun's office. Old laws, new intentions. The Seo family answered with a gala, autumn serenade at Jianghua Hall. Thick invitations, zither, silver tables. Lady Waran raised a cup, to harmony between houses and crown. Ji-hoon toasted with water, to harmony between crown and people. Min Kyung stepped forward, smile rehearsed. In respect for tradition, I request Miss Han Eunji be presented to the 4 halls. It will be an honor to see her shine. The hall smiled like a blade. Invitation and ambush in one. Ji-hoon stood firm, she will be presented. And she will have teachers. That night, tutors were chosen. Master Jang Mu-jin, letters and history; at Sejin, Mistress Na Soi, music and calligraphy; at Jianghua, Lady Shin Ariam, ceremonial; at Hyopjin, and for etiquette, none other than Queen Jo Yun. The silence turned to rumor. The queen teaching a commoner? The city had no other topic. At Seo Manor, Min Kyung took it as insult and opportunity. If the queen trains her, we'll trip the ground, not the step, she told her father. We'll make the trial a stage. Every failure, a rumor. Every success, a plot. And the whispers spread, Eunji uses cheap ink. Next day, fake bottles appeared in Jianghua Hall. She can't read classics. A scribe altered her practice exam in Sejin Hall. She ignores old greetings. A tutor in Hyopjin forgot to teach one detail. It looked like bad luck. It was design. Eunji stumbled, breathed, restarted. Mistress Na Soi saw the fake ink and burned it quietly. Master Jang tore the false copy and gave her the original from his library. Lady Shin drilled the bow until it became muscle. And when exhaustion nearly turned to surrender, the queen whispered in Yolam courtyard, I don't want a perfect princess. I want a woman who can choose what's right when she's alone. While the commoner learned, the heiress sharpened. Min Kyung met Sergeant Im Tae-soo in a palace corridor. I need order in the square. Order has a price, my lady, he risked. And disorder has consequence, she replied calmly. Choose which side you'll stand on when the tide turns. Im Tae-soo left, soul sold, body trembling. Next day, his men stirred small chaos at the dawn hearings. A single shove, and the words, plebeian violence, spread. Choi Jin-woo contained it bloodlessly, arrested without spectacle, and the rumor died for lack of air. Late at night, Min Kyung returned to Seongrim Terrace. The city slept, but accidents kept working. She looked at her reflection in the lake and practiced the smile the world demanded. But her heart beat to another rhythm, not of wounded love, but of control slipping. She walked down the stairs with the only choice left when all others fail, raise the stakes. At the opening of the 4 halls trial, I'll ask the king for public blessing, she told her mother, erasing the last trace of doubt. If Han Eun-ji fails, the kingdom will have judged her. If she passes, I'll make her look like a victorious intruder. Either way, she'll be marked. Lady Warren nodded. Lord Seo only wrote dates, like carving an epitaph before the body. And while the kingdom held its breath for the trial, two truths grew like opposite tides, the love turning into discipline at Chonghua Palace, and the fury turning into method at Seo Manor. In Hanul, the halls would be more than rooms. They would be battlefields. And no one would leave untouched. The weeks before the trial of the four halls turned the Chonghua Palace into a silent training ground. Not for swords or spears, but for words, gestures, and measured breaths. Han Eun-ji, who until recently was only the daughter of a craftsman from Seongmin, now walked among marble columns and whispering gardens, learning that even the way she held a cup could be judged as a sentence. Cherry Blossom, the training of the commoner in the Sijin Hall, Master Jang Mujin tested her memory with classical texts, some written in Hanja so old they felt like spells. Eun-ji stumbled, confused the characters, but never gave up. To repeat is not the same as to understand, Jang said, handing her yet another scroll. Royalty needs a firm mouth, but also sharp eyes. In the Jianghua Hall, Mistress Na Soi taught her to handle brushes and instruments. The strings of the Gaegeum cut her fingers until they blistered. Still, Eun-ji endured. The first pain is the price of future harmony. In the Hyopjin Hall, Lady Shin Arium repeated ceremonies with her until her body moved without thought, the exact bow. The precise tilt of the head, the step that kept distance without seeming to retreat. And in the Yolam courtyard, Queen Jo-yun herself sat with her in the shade of magnolias. What I want most to see in you is not perfection, but steadiness. Eun-ji answered without hesitation, Your Majesty, I already learned steadiness from life. All I lack is to polish the reflection, Milky Way the silent support. Meanwhile, Lee Ji-hoon appeared in the early mornings, often in the Nokdu forest, where the wind hid words that should not be heard in palace corridors. There, far from the city's eyes, they were just Ji-hoon and Eun-ji, without titles or barriers. They say your hand is not made for a scepter, but for a needle, Ji-hoon once teased with a smile. And they say your hand is not made for a sword, but for a pen, she shot back playfully. They laughed together, and for a moment, the weight of the world felt light. It was in those dawn meetings that their closeness became more than protection. When Ji-hoon held her calloused hands to guide them in the proper posture for calligraphy, Eun-ji felt her heart lose its rhythm. And when she teased him with shy irony, he realized he had found someone who saw him not as a prince, but as a man. Hibiscus, the turning point in the palace days passed, and the rumor planted by Min Kyung, that Eun-ji was nothing but an intruder, started to fade, replaced by what the servants saw, her dedication. Maids whispered how she cleaned her own mistakes without ordering help, guards spoke of her discipline without complaint, and masters admitted they had never seen such determination. Little by little, the commoner stopped being a joke and became a symbol of resilience. Min Kyung, meanwhile, clenched her teeth every time her attempts to stain Eun-ji's name turned into tales of perseverance. The seamstress was no longer just a seamstress. She had become the commoner who dares to learn. And in the alleys of the capital, the people began to divide, some whispered support. Others feared the fall of order. Revolving hearts, the confirmation on the eve of the trial, Ji-hoon found Eun-ji again at the Baekseal Bridge. The river reflected the fishermen's lanterns, and the night air turned their breath into mist. Tomorrow, when you step into the halls, you won't carry only your name. You'll carry the weight of those who were never heard, Ji-hoon said. And whatever the result, I will not take back my choice. Eun-ji, eyes brimming with tears, held tightly to the blue thread still tied to her wrist. If I fall, they will say the prince was mistaken. Then I will answer that the mistake was the kingdom's, for taking too long to see. It was there that Eun-ji understood she was no longer alone. Her fight was not only against Min Kyung, but against an entire wall built by tradition. And with Ji-hoon at her side, even if the path was full of thorns, she had the strength to go on. Rose the birth of something greater that night. Before parting, Ji-hoon held her face in his hands. There was no burning kiss, no exaggerated promise, only the deep silence of two souls recognizing each other. Eun-ji, he whispered. Ji-hoon, she replied. And in that shared calling, they knew they were no longer prince and commoner. They were two halves fate had stubbornly decided to unite before an entire kingdom. The birth of their love was not sealed in oaths or political alliances, but in the simple truth that when they looked at each other, neither saw titles, only honesty. The sun rose over the kingdom of Hanul, painting the walls of Changhua Palace in gold and reflecting on Lake Yanawa as if the heavens themselves had descended to earth. The city awoke in anticipation. This time, it wasn't just about the harvest, but the future of the crown, the weight of tradition, and the courage of an unlikely love. Han Eun-ji, the humble daughter of Seongmin, once called an intruder and mocked before everyone, now walked toward the trial of the four halls with her head held high. Not because she had already won, but because she had discovered that her greatest victory would not be over Seo Min-kyung, but over the silence that the court had always imposed on those born without titles. The Gwanghwan Square overflowed with people, nobles filled the balconies of Seonjeong Hall, and the king watched from his portable throne, his eyes hiding more doubts than certainties. Among all, only two hearts beat differently, Ji-hoon's and Eun-ji's. A love born of the improbable, strengthened through humiliation, now stood against the walls of tradition. When Eun-ji entered the first hall, the air seemed to hold its breath. The court watched, waiting for her fall. Whispers anticipated her stumble. But every gesture she made, every bow, every word spoken carried not perfection, but truth. She was not a commoner pretending to be a princess, she was a woman declaring her worth. And while the judges searched for flaws, the people saw something greater, courage. The courage not to lower her eyes when everything told her to. The courage to rise even after being pushed down. In the last hall, Hyeopjin, where ceremonies sealed fates, Eun-ji made her final bow. It was not flawless, not the most graceful. But it was firm, sincere. And in that moment, even the most skeptical felt they were witnessing something no ancient law could deny. From the platform above, Ji-hoon extended his hand again, not as a prince who chooses, but as a man who joins. The silence broke into a roar, voices, applause, tears. Han Eun-ji, the seamstress of Seongmin, was now recognized not only by the prince, but by the people of Hanul. Seo Min-kyung, hidden in the shadows of the Seo Manor, tasted the bitterness of defeat. Her eyes, wet with tears, were not of weakness but of burning fury. She knew the war wasn't over. She may have lost the battle in the square, but in her heart, vengeance was already written as a promise. Still, for Ji-hoon and Eun-ji, this was the beginning of a new chapter. Not a perfect tale, but a love story forged in fire, humiliation, and resilience. A story where the prince did not choose the wealthy heiress, but the young woman who dared to dream. And the people whispered, sometimes, being rejected is only the path to being chosen by the one who truly matters. Under the harvest lanterns that lit the sky, the kingdom of Hanul understood that true love does not ask permission, does not need titles, does not wait for approval. It simply happens, and when it does, it changes destinies. And so, hand in hand, Ji-hoon and Eun-ji left the hall not as prince and commoner, but as two souls who chose to walk together. Even if the whole world tried to tear them apart. The future would still bring wars, schemes, and trials. But that night, under the stars reflected in the lake, only one truth mattered: love had won. Sparkles the end, betrayed by the heiress, but chosen by the prince.
Hey, did you like this story? Then hit subscribe to Between Lies and Love so you won't miss the next chapters. Don't forget to like this video. It really helps us bring you more emotional, anime-style K-drama stories. And I want to know, what was your favorite part of this story? What do you think we could do better in the next episodes? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your idea might even show up in the next video. So subscribe, like, comment, and join this family that loves drama, twists, and unforgettable stories.